There we
Hey, what's
go.
up? All right,
There we
awesome.
Okay, so I think where we're at right now is you're still having a little bit of discourse drawing the connection between um my my personal comprehension of logic and
Yeah,
our human comprehension of logic.
pretty much. And I guess now I kind of wanted to get to the validity of that logic. How do you determine that your connection to logic is valid?
Way I see it is that it's based on our already understood logically, scientifically valid physical and mathematical principles.
Okay. So if you have an understand that method of logic to whatever method of logic you're using to determine that God exists, that means you can obviously demonstrate it, right? You'd be able to demonstrate it?
Well, I haven't tried to determine that God exists. I've simply tried to argue that my belief in God is logical.
Okay. But I mean, if it's logical, then whatever logic you're using, you should be able to demonstrate the logical existence of that God, right? I would think so.
That's how we use it. That's how we use logic colloquially.
Yeah.
In the realm of the mathematical logic outside of human comprehension, do things need to be proven? Is what I would ask.
Okay. But that.
Or are things just inherently true?
That's a rough one to get around. How are we supposed to verify anything to be true or not true if that logical process doesn't require verification to be true?
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't necessarily require verification to be true because it is inherently true.
Okay. But are you saying there's a... Okay, but what I'm getting at here is if you're saying that there is something that's inherently true out there that would make it logical to believe in God, you should have it to believe in God, right? You should know what... Why is it shaking? You should know what it is to go ahead and go on with a belief in the existence of a deity, right? Does that make sense? Like...
Yeah, no, it does, but it's not based on evidence like we would typically colloquially think of logic. It's based simply on principles of validity.
Okay. Now, do you know of any of these? Have any of these philosophers tried, at least, put a term for whatever it is, or at least?
Not that I know of.
No. Are they just arguing that it exists, that it possibly exists? We just don't know about it, or have they?
There's not really much information on speculative realism.
Yeah.
I think what it is I have it on the Wikipedia right here. While often in disagreement over basic philosophical issues, the speculative realist thinkers have a shared resistance to philosophies of human finitude, inspired by the tradition of Immanuel Kant. So
Okay.
human finitude. So they oppose human finitude.
Okay.
And Wikipedia doesn't even have an article on it.
Now,
so they're basically arguing of the logic that exists regardless of human comprehension, and they're trying to examine it and discuss it.
Oh, okay, okay. But there are things now we know to be inherently true, right? Do you disagree?
Like what?
Certain, logical. I can't. I'm going to research them real quick. I can't remember what they're called. Let me find them. Things that we know that are inherently true that we use in logic today.
I think scientists don't think that anything is inherently valid, because scientists always acknowledge the fact that there's always something that can contradict whatever they think of.
Well, that's true, but they use logic to come to the conclusions that they make in science. Do they not?
They do.
Okay. But that's fair. That's fair to always acknowledge that something could come around and disprove let's say, for example, the theory of evolution, right? We could always make that one discovery that maybe no one has found yet. And you always keep an open mind that it's possible, that it's out there, it's somewhere, and it could just completely come in and shatter our entire view of evolution, right? And you can acknowledge that. But until that comes along, there's no reason to say that evolution isn't true.
Correct.
But always be open-minded that it's a possibility. But all the evidence we have now points to it is, until that one thing may come along.
Correct.
So they're still using logic as a foundation behind their discoveries, and it's completely logical to say that something may come along and disprove it. It's just as over time it becomes more and more, we try to make it more foundationed, and it's why we have something that goes from a hypothesis to a theory. At first it's a general guess about the natural world, and then it becomes, using logic and reason, we can test it, and it keeps, we can finally graduate it to a theory, something that is backed up, and now we can use it to predict other models, right?
Yep.
It's still all based in logic as we understand it. So some things inherently in logic are true that we understand. Like I'm still trying to find that. There's what is it?
So what I'm doing is I'm drawing the connection, attempting to argue to draw the connection between the logic that inherently exists outside of, regardless of human comprehension. So
yeah,
I'm trying to make the connection between our logic and why it's valid to believe in things.
But could we, in your view, we can still use the logic we have now to verify the existence of God, right? And if something contradicts the logic we have now, is there a reason to believe in God?
Rephrase that.
Oh, okay. Well, let me ask to make sure you believe that whatever. So the logic we have now is true, right? Do you think that most of the logic that exists now that we use in science, whatnot, is true? Some of it is fundamentally true.
Yeah, the logic of science and the logic of walking down the road. I would say it's all true until proven otherwise.
Now, do you think any of the logic we have now points to the existence of God? Because we can't really argue about anything outside of the logic we already know. It just
Let me ask you, does any of the logic that we have now point to the Big Bang?
I would say so, yeah.
How?
The mathematical proofs that we have, the background radiation. We can observe features that we can logically put together and evaluate that point to a cluster of something that expanded billions of years ago. We have evidence for it. We can say that we have evidence for it.
What does
Right.
make you say that those things didn't come from something else?
Well, that's the thing. We can't test that. We have no logical reason.
So, therefore, Big Bang is just as valid as any theory of any god.
But it's not. Because we don't have the logic to test God. We can only observe what we have in our universe, what we have now. And, I mean, to come along and say that there may be some logical foundation elsewhere that may point to the existence of a God, we don't have it, therefore we can't make that claim.
Why is that stuff evidence of the Big Bang but not evidence of God?
All the Big Bang is evidence we have for the Big Bang just says that matter was densely close and expanded, right? That's all the Big Bang claims. It expanded, it was hot, more, and then, went everywhere. Right? Whatever, that's a very simple version. It doesn't claim to know anything before time and space. We don't know. We just don't know. There's no way to test it. It like I said before, it's out of our realm of logic. The Big Bang is not connected to God. It's just... What we know is that it started off small and expanded. But what came before that, we can't test, we can't say, we don't even know. Right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
So, we cannot, there's no logical reason now to say there is a God.
Well, your definition and your viewpoint of the Big Bang is being, I don't want to say restricted or anything that would imply negativity towards you.
Yeah.
But it's being limited or constrained by human construct. You have to think.
But it's all we know. It's what we can test.
But we're talking about and thinking about possible logical truths.
Okay.
Facts.
But logically, strictly using logic, right? Could I say the same thing about other things? Always going back to that one, the fairy, right? It's very common. Could I not say there is a logical, the only reason people don't believe in fairies is because they are restricted to their human concept of logic. Right? It's the same thing we're doing with God. It's not testable. It's not we don't have any valid reason to even say that it's true. But if I make the claim that there is a logical,
possibility.
Logical possibility, I have to show what that logical possibility is. What logical foundation I have to even make that claim. It's a burden of proof. If you make the claim something exists, you have to prove it. You have to show why it's possible. And if you can't do that, there's no reason to believe it. So it only makes sense with what we know now to not take a position on that and to just say, it's possible, but I don't know why I would believe it. Until, if speculative realism is the philosophy that comes up with these new, I don't know what they're called. They have names in philosophy, but, these foundational logical steps or whatever, right? Until they come up with something that says we can evaluate God, we have no reason now to do so.
I believe you're correct.
Okay. Then why believe?
Well, I mean, belief doesn't have to have a reason. I was strictly arguing that it's logical.
Okay. But it's only the way I'm seeing it. It's only logical, in the logic we don't know yet. That's basically what I'm getting. That, and then that's a very simple version. But
you and I are no scientists or mathematicians.
Yeah.
So scientists and mathematicians do know this logic.
Okay. But have you? But all logic, all.
How would you
evidence.
apply it to? How would you apply that logic to proving a God versus anything else?
What do you mean?
Is what I think the question would be.
Oh.
How would you use mathematical logic and physical logic to prove anything else? And there, right now, we might not have a way to prove one way or the other. But just because we don't have a way to prove or disprove does not mean that it's illogical to believe in God, since there is logic that exists. There is logical reasoning and logical principles that exist regardless of human comprehension, and that exist. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. So
it's all about drawing the connection between our world and the metaphysical world.
Okay. But it's still, as of now, we have no evidence that that world even exists.
Well, I shouldn't have said world, the metaphysical.
Well, yeah, well,
that's basically saying ideas.
Well, there's no evidence that anything beyond what we know now exists, right?
Yes, I think that's correct. But evidence is not required for logic, as we've already stated that math is not evidence, but math is logic.
Yeah. Well, what was that statement? What was the statement about math? That it's not evidence but logic.
But it is logic.
But it uses evidence, and it uses factual statements to come to conclusions.
It does, but it's not evidence of anything in itself. Math is not evidence of itself in anything.
Well, I mean, I would disagree. Physics. Well, maybe it's not. Okay. If I get where you're coming from, could you say mathematics is? You could say it describes certain things, but it doesn't really
prove them.
Tell you what's there. Okay, it doesn't prove them. Well, we use it as a tool to prove plenty of things.
That's correct.
I don't kind of. What do you mean it can't prove anything? Or
math can prove things, but it's not.
It's not what?
It's not evidence.
It's not evidence. Okay.
Math has the ability to prove things, but it's not evidence of something.
How does it prove things without being evidence?
I'm not sure.
Like
I don't think that anything we know that we quote unquote know is proven.
Yeah.
Nothing in our reality is proven. Nothing in our reality is proven. It's all speculation. It's all hypothesis. It's all supported by mathematics and physics.
Okay.
Because there's always the possibility, like I said, that a scientist never considers anything logical or illogical. our entire reality, if one thing throws off your theory of evolution, your theory of anything,
Yeah.
if one thing throws it off, the entire thing is thrown out the window. Like, our human reality could simply be discredited by saying, oh, well, it turns out we're not real at all, and we're actually in a human computer matrix created by aliens. So nothing we have is finitely proven.
But you could say that things... Okay. Even if we know nothing about our reality, the nature of our reality, we can still describe our reality, right?
Yes.
Like, even if we exist within a computer system that's rendered everything around us or whatnot, the physics we have still describe the nature of, whatever laws govern something falling, right? I drop this at whatever meters per second, that will always remain true. We can still describe and technically prove things within that reality. Could you say that? Well, we could say we don't know the nature of it, but we could prove things about in the reality in which we exist. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Then, if that's true, that doesn't mean... Then I don't know. Is it sort of? I would say it's sort of meaningless to say that the nature of our reality even matters, because we can still describe things within it. Because our reality doesn't fall apart just because we become some sort of computate. We're being generated by a computer. It just changes the nature of it, not exactly how it functions or how it did function. Right?
Yes. So that's all along the lines of fact. Do you see where I'm drawing that connection?
Can you elaborate more?
Like, even if the nature of our reality is changed, we still have a reality, and whatever is within that reality is what is fact.
Okay. So what? Say the first part again. So whatever's in that reality is fact, but what about the nature of it?
Regardless of the nature, whatever.
Okay.
Regardless of the nature, whatever is in the reality that we are existing in is fact.
Okay.
So our principles of gravity are...
Yeah.
Well, are they? Because if they're not real... No. Because technically, we are always in a state of reality. Everything is in a state of reality. The only thing that is not in a state of reality is nothing.
Well, even that, physicists argue about that now.
Do they?
Well, I think, can't remember his name, but there was a statement that even nothing has weight. That there's stuff popping in and out of existence, and that's on the quantum... I'm not a physicist, so don't make any claims on it, but...
Yeah, things can come of nothing.
Well, but they even say nothing has weight. More, you'd have to look into that. But that was a I don't know if it ever got proven, but I think it's still a hypothesis. Yeah, I guess that's fair to say there's a lot about nature we don't know. But what we don't know, we can't jump to conclusions. That comes with a religion. Just because we don't... just because we can say there's a method of logic we don't know about, or... it's... Have you ever heard of God of the Gaps?
No.
It's just things that we haven't filled in, just get filled in with, oh, well, it could be God that did it, right?
Right.
But as we discover more and more, that gap gets smaller and smaller. It used to be that demons and stuff cause sickness and whatnot, but now we know that bacteria, germs, that's the actual reason for it. And then, God have kept the planets in motion. Then now we have physics, and God did all this, and now it's getting smaller and smaller. And now we just have that God. We don't know what existed before the Big Bang, but we fill in that blank with God. We can't jump to that conclusion. It's not reasonable to do that. It's not logical to do it, right?
Well, what else would you? My question would be, what else would you put in place of God, and would it be any less valid than anything else? Like,
yeah.
Would it be any less valid to say that you're logically believing in God versus the particles of the Big Bang coming from nothing?
Well, that's the thing. We don't know what it is. I don't replace it with anything. I don't know what was there. I don't know what started it. It could have easily been a physical.
So that's where you come into being agnostic, while I choose to believe.
But is it reasonable to believe? What makes it reasonable to fill in that gap with something you don't know about, something we can't test? Even in your realms of logic, which, maybe in some small, field of philosophy, it's still not verifiable within our world. Why can we jump to that conclusion? I say we can't. We just don't know. Maybe nothing existed. Maybe thousands of multiverses existed before. I just don't know. And I can't make any claim to what did before until I have evidence to say that something did.
Well, we're talking about belief.
Yeah.
And belief is subjective. You can believe in whatever you want. So how can logically, if we're going to argue logically, let's pretend that humans don't exist, and we're talking about how the universe was created, okay?
Okay.
Logically, why am I wrong to say that God did it versus something came from nothing?
You can't be proven wrong. You're not necessarily wrong. We just can't say you're wrong, but we also can't say you're right. And I can't say something came from nothing. I think that's an accurate statement. The Big Bang doesn't even say anything about that. It just says matter was dense and expanded.
Where did that matter come from?
I don't know. I don't know.
Always
and
exist?
I can't.
So we're thinking
It could have done that.
So we have three possibilities that you and I have just thought of here.
Yeah.
God, that matter coming from nothing, and that matter always have existed.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and then I can add more. We could say there was a multiverse, right? And then it closed due to gravity and expanded. Now that was a theory. I think that was disproven. That could even be a thing. There could be a bunch of bubbles. I don't know. There's a lot of things we could say, but logically, I can't say one over the other because I have no evidence for one over the other. That's at least my position. I can't make a claim to anything because I don't have the evidence to make the claim for anything. So there's no reason to believe, until something comes in and says, whatever. Until there's evidence that backs at least a certain position.
But it's not illogical to believe in God versus something coming from nothing versus it having existed versus anything. It's just not useful.
I think it is illogical. And it may not be useful, but there's no logical reason behind it. Okay, it may not be illogical, but there's no reason behind doing it. There's no logical reason to do it. In fact, it's a matter of faith more than reason. I've jumped to this conclusion without evidence, so therefore it's not logical to do so. I could go ahead and just jump to the conclusion that we're part of one computer, and that computer got turned on in the Big Bang. I don't know, And I could say that and take that on faith, complete and utter faith, but I have no reason to say it. But it's a possibility. Is it a possibility that we're just part of a computer that was booted at that time? I guess you could say that. But there's no logical foundation to believe it.
there's no colloquial logical foundation. There's no human logical foundation.
But in order to say that there's some other logical foundation, you would have to show and tell what that foundation is, and at least show that method works.
Why do I have to? Why is evidence a necessary prerequisite of logic?
I mean, okay. Even if we can,
the only reason that we think that evidence is a necessary prerequisite of logic is because of how we apply logic in our day-to-day lives. Evidence is not required for logic.
Okay, but even if I was to say that some parts of some foundation, whatever this is, this method to determine if something's true, even if it didn't require evidence, it was just foundationally true. It should be tested. It can be tested, right, and shown and used to show that other things are true. Would that not be within the realm of reason to say that whatever logical foundation this is can show that some things are true and not true?
It's not. I don't think it's a requirement to be logically sound.
Then how do we know if this logical foundation is true? Whatever it is. If it doesn't require evidence, how do we know it's true?
You don't. Which basically boils down to the fact that it's useless.
Okay. But it doesn't make it logical. I mean, I guess this is semantics.
Strictly speaking, it's logical.
But not under our definition.
Not under the way humans apply it.
Because the way humans have used logic, it's been tested, repeated, and has worked. It's been shown to work, right?
Yeah,
it has brought us from the dark ages to, I'm speaking to you from, I don't even know where you live,
Right.
It has taken us that far. It's shown to work. But this new method, how do we know that it works?
You don't know, and there's no burden of proof in this. In logic outside of human comprehension, there is no burden of proof.
Okay.
I think that's my opinion. I just thought of it.
Yeah. Okay, so would you be taking this on faith? If you have no other way to determine if it works, you just believe it works, isn't that taking it on faith?
Complete trust or confidence in someone or something. So is faith illogical, is what you're asking.
I think so, yeah. Because it doesn't have a foundation to it. You can't prove it.
Yeah, see, you're strictly coined to the usage of logic as it applies to humans. Wow, I am not. But I'm not saying I'm superior.
Yeah. You just.
I'm not limiting myself to the requirement of human usage and application and the definition.
Then, as a human who's making that judgment on something, how do you? We have to come to some agreement on what's true and not true, right? And
not necessarily. Only if we need to operate in real life.
Okay. How about this?
But if we're talking about things that we can't necessarily right now prove, we don't need to do that.
Okay, well, that's understandable. But if we were, our modern view of logic, the view, strictly in the, nothing to do with I have it here, speculative realism philosophy. everything there's some guidelines and things that we know work, right? That keep us on track, that allow logic to come to its conclusion. Things like, we know that, fallacies, right?
Yeah.
Things that if you argue with always seem to, take you off course or end up coming to an incorrect conclusion. We know those. I guess you could say they could be inherently true. Some fallacies just, they follow certain rules. Does the logic you use follow rules?
I can't think of any, because right now I'm simply thinking of things. I'm thinking about distinct possible. Right now, my example is distinct possibilities of creation of the universe before humans ever existed.
Yeah.
That's my example. Am I not being logical in assessing those right now?
Not in my view. If they're not backed up, or if they can be proven, then no, it wouldn't be logical. But your view holds.
Let's go back to logic.
Okay.
Reasoning conducted or assessed according to strict principles of validity. And then...
Yeah, those principles of validity is what I'm always getting back to.
Validity is the quality of being logically or factually sound. Soundness or cognizency. So, arguing the creation of the universe, arguing all of these different possibilities, how am I not being logically or factually sound in my assessment?
Because you've not made any factual assessments. There's been...
Yeah, I've assessed the possibility that it's possible God created the universe. I assessed the possibility that something came from nothing. I assessed the possibility that we're in a matrix. I assessed...
we went over those.
But we didn't. The only thing that I think what you're thinking of is that we haven't studied them. We haven't had any concrete evidence of them. But what I'm thinking of, I think you are thinking of material things, while I'm thinking of abstract concepts and ideas.
Okay, well you could say that. Well, I'm more accurate. I would say that because the reason I say that you haven't made a valid, what is it called?
Assessment.
Assessment, yeah. Is because in that assessment, like the possibility that God exists, how can we even make that assessment when there's no way to test it?
Using our human judgment. Using our reasoning.
Reasoning. But have you made a valid assessment for what? But it always seems that we've jumped to some conclusion without assessing.
We haven't concluded anything. We're simply logically discussing possibilities.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like you said before, in the early part of this, you know that it's a possibility that you could be wrong, right, about religion.
Yes.
Correct. Now, how about this? You could make these arguments, whatever, coming from that field of philosophy, for the existence of God, but what about your specific religion that you've chosen? Because you could just be arguing for deism. What about Christianity?
It would be like a subsect of deism.
Yeah, but what makes it more logical to... What makes it logical to believe in Christianity?
It would be when we're discussing the creation of the universe or the creation of things like that. It would be the belief that is what happened and that is what is true.
But if it's a belief, that's just taken on faith. do you is there assessments you can make that lead to the conclusion that Christianity is true?
Like I've already said, the assessments are our reasoning, thinking of these things. Those are assessments.
Just those.
In and of themselves, those are assessments.
Just those.
Yes, those are assessments. Let's define assessment, I guess.
Okay.
The evaluation or estimation of the nature, quality, or ability of someone or something. Those are assessments.
Well, I'm talking about, okay, just make sure we're on the same thing. Like, you know, when you do a logical proof, you take steps, right? Each thing has to be true and confirm the next, right?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about. Like if we're, you know those, I can't remember what they're called. They follow these logical steps that lead to a conclusion, and that's either true or false, right? Those are, I guess, how I'm seeing assessments. So, those in themselves are assessments that come to the conclusion that Christianity is true.
I kind of zoned out. Repeat that again.
So the view, like, you know, just
those are assessments that
come to the conclusion that Christianity is true. They're logical assessments that lead to the
conclusion that
Christianity is true. And
yes, that's how I see it.
Okay, but I guess I disagree with both propositions. That how is it that just because you can think of things, Christianity is true? Or whatever assessment you've made that leads to a conclusion.
Well, we're not arguing what is actually true. We're arguing what is logically valid to believe is true. We're not making any claim of the fact because we're both agnostic.
Yeah.
We're arguing what is why and what is logical to believe is true.
Well, what makes it logical to believe that Christianity is true just because you think or you can assess?
That's logical.
But if one of those propositions is not true, then it's not logical. I mean, I could say jam, like there's this one example. Jam is good. What else is good? I don't know. Peanut butter is good, therefore peanut butter is jam. That's not logical. It makes assessments that come to a conclusion, but it's not logical assessments that come to an accurate conclusion.
So those would be incorrect assessments. But
They're not logical.
You would have the burden of proof to prove that the jam is not jelly or whatever you said.
And that's the same thing. Or the person who makes the claim that it is jelly, jam is jelly.
Yes, and you and I are not making those claims.
Oh, okay. So you don't make the claim at all that God may exist, right? You just take it on faith.
Yes.
Well, I guess that's the whole point we were at. That it's just if you've taken it on faith, then how can it be logical to do so? Because you like you said, it was logical. You used logic more than faith. But if you've not made a claim, how are you using logic?
Well, I think you summed it up. We're about to end up here.
Yeah.
I think you have like I don't want to say it, like a conflict or like some problem with the word faith and how it like contradicts and logic. I think you have a problem with faith, not a problem, not personally, but like you have a thing about faith contradicting logic.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I'm gonna grab another cigarette, and I'm down to continue unless you're getting too tired.
No, it's fine. We can keep going.
All right, I'll be right back.